your mic if you don't mind. I'm going to sort of go through this presentation, and then we will go into a time of discussion. So let me pray for us. Father God, what a privilege it is to be able to get together with these pastors and church leaders. Thank you, Father, for the leadership they're giving, the service that they are rendering, the gospel impact that they're making. Just grant to us wisdom and knowledge as we try to figure out and unpack the things that are in front of us. Lord, there are things that we know and there are things we don't know, but Father, the good news is we know you, and therefore we know that you have a plan and a purpose and you're fulfilling it. And so we trust you to guide us and direct us, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So let me share with you guys that I sent this presentation to Dr. Gray to make sure that I was okay with sharing a few things that are on here, because some of these things are just ongoing discussions. And so we've got to make sure that we're sharing stuff as we know it right now. But understand that there's a caveat here. Number one, you see the title, Church Entry 5/2020, what could be expected of the church. I can't tell you what will be. I can tell you what possibly could be. And there could be other things that we're not aware of at this time. A couple other caveats I want to share with you, if I can get my, we've got to hear from the state government officials before anything is official. All right, so we're still waiting from them to tell us what the things are going to be in second, and then it will still be subject to interpretation and change. I decided not to say that it would be confusing, but I think we found so far that every time we get an official word, that actually just opens up the door to more questions. And I think you all understand that and know that there's going to be some things that will be specific and some things that won't be. I'm also going to ask Nick Sanderford if he would, because he's been on some of these conversations, to interject at any point anything that he'd like to add. So Nick, please feel free to do that.
Well, I'm not very good at speaking up, David, but I will if I can add anything.
Okay. Well, yeah, Nick tends to be shy, so I just we want to acknowledge that. So, but what we've got to do is we've got to be prayerful. Obviously, these are we've got to be careful. We shepherd people, and we have a responsibility to care for them and what we say and ask them to do. There are going to be some that do it because we ask them to, and so we want to be careful. Yes.
I'm trying to record this, and it says ask permission from the host. So whoever the host is, can I have permission?
That's me, but let me see if I can help you do that, Rob.
David, aren't you going to send out the recording to everybody after this?
Yeah, we are going to.
Oh, then never mind.
Okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So if everybody would mute, because I'm hearing a little noise background, that's going to make the recording tough to hear. So the other thing is, since we're responsible for what we say to people, we obviously want to be careful. We also want to be Christ honoring in all that we do. You may not like what the government decides, but we're here to proclaim and to make famous the name of Jesus. And that's what we need to do. And we want to do that. So the next things I'll share with you, please keep these things that I've shared with you in mind. People want to know how many people can meet. Well, it looks like attending numbers will probably be based on building occupancy guidelines. So here's an example, and please understand that this is just an example. If attendance is based on 40% of your posted fire marshal seating capacity, a social and physical distancing requirements can be met. So in other words, if your room can accommodate 100, according to the fire code, you could have up to 40 if social physical distancing requirements can be met. Now note there's two criteria that might be there. One is going to be a percentage, whatever that percentage is. It could be 20, it could be 30, it could be 40, it could be any percentage. We don't know what that percentage is going to be. One of the criteria is probably going to be a percentage of your capacity. But you also will have to bring into play your social physical distancing requirements. Every building is structured, built differently, And so the percentage will be the maximum you can have, but you must maintain social physical distancing. So even though you may be able to have 40 people in the room, if you can only have 30 there and maintain social physical distancing, then you can only have 30 in the room. Does that make sense? And that social physical distancing requirement is, the number is going to vary according to how many families you have that can sit together, how many single people that you have coming to your service, how many couples that got mad at each other on the way to church and won't sit by each other. There's any number of factors that come in. And that was a joke. I know you're all muted. I know you're laughing your head off right now. But the bottom line is that the maximum will be that percentage, but you may not be able to have the maximum depending on social and physical distancing. Now, note I'm using the word physical. I think that's a better word as we're moving back into our churches. We're not trying to be anti-social. Some people won't even look at you at the grocery store, as if they look in your eye for 1 second, they're going to get the virus. We definitely have to be people who are social with one another, but we have to maintain that physical distancing. At this point, churches may be able to use multiple large rooms in their building simultaneously to accommodate worshipers. That means you may have to use closed circuit or social media to communicate with those other rooms. If you do have people in more than one room, I'd encourage you to find a way for the people in the one room to see the people in the other room at some point in the service, just to sort of find a way to connect as many people that are on your campus at a time. Churches will probably be asked to suspend childcare until daycares are allowed to open. So please understand that we're not talking about going back to a full schedule. We're probably not talking about going back to being able to offer, age group oriented ministries. Churches will be discouraged from conducting Sunday school, at least in traditional classroom settings. What I mean by that is that the rooms that are set up for 10 people, probably they're not going to allow you to necessarily meet in a room like that. But let's say you move your adult Sunday school into the sanctuary and you decide that you're going to have a big class in the sanctuary and have Sunday school and then have your worship. Well, if you decide to do that and use the same room for Sunday school and worship, you probably will be required to sanitize between events. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Seating for attendees must be at least 6 feet apart, and consider limiting seating to alternate rows. Households can sit together without social physical distancing. That's our understanding at this point. That seems to be pretty standard. So families can sit together. So the more families you have in attendance, probably the closer you'll be able to get to that capacity, the maximum capacity, because you're not using as much social, physical distancing type space. Other guidelines, you might be asked to suspend the use of choir during this time. Worship leaders, those on the stage, will need to be at least 6 foot apart between individuals. Here's something I want to say, because not every church has done music in this temporary season. And so the first time you may be doing live music is a Sunday you go back. And so you haven't had to think about the fact that you can't share microphones. You need microphones and other equipment should not be shared by individuals on the stage. They need to be dedicated. So those who've been doing this already know that and probably already practicing that. But this is for those churches that have basically done remote broadcast without worship. You need to be careful of that. You might be asked to limit the sharing of frequently touched objects, hymn books, pew Bibles. So you're going to want to project songs and words if possible. Here's where it gets a little fuzzy. One point they're telling us bulletins should not be distributed, but can be made available to pick up. But there's also some talk about doing all that electronically. The least number of things you have to pass out, the least number of things that people have to touch, the better off you are. And so I'd encourage you to keep that in mind. You will very likely be asked to suspend hugs and handshakes and other things that violate the 6-foot social physical distancing guidelines. So make sure that you help your people be creative in how to greet one another without violating those things. No passing of offering plates. So, you need to go to a stationary collection box. People still mailing it in, doing electronic methods of collecting, but you do not want to pass the offering plates. I'm pretty sure that's going to be a pretty set rule, and you probably expected that one to come. Areas used must be sanitized before and between services. Now, this probably eliminates having a back-to-back schedule. You must have time allotted to sanitize between groups. So if you're saying I'm going to have a group at 9, a group at 10, probably not doable because you're going to have to clean up between the groups being in there. So you have to give time for cleanup. And also you need to consider giving time for one group to exit, the other to enter. That may not matter as much as, let's say, you have everybody enter one way and exit another way, but it may matter in churches that really have only one main entrance and one main exit. You need to allow time for the room to be sanitized and for people to get out of and into. Many churches don't have large gathering spots or foyer areas, so you can't have people passing both ways. You got to keep that in mind. All furniture, so this is part of the sanitizing. All furniture, fixtures that may be touched by the public should be cleaned before each meeting. It should be done, as it says, between multiple services. You need to put special emphasis on bathrooms, door handles, pew, chair backs, and anything else that's frequently touched, within the places that you're gathering. I was asked about whether doing coffee and donuts. I've not heard anything on that, but let me say grocery stores have suspended free samples. I know that because that's the only reason I go to a grocery store and Costco is to get the free samples, and they've suspended them. So I would doubt that you're going to be able to give out donuts and coffee. And I would say that even if you think you can, I would wait a few weeks to do that until you understand the flow of your people and help your people be more comfortable with gathering back together again. That would be my advice. You need to have hand sanitizer. So you need to go to Kroger or wherever and buy it and have it, get it ready. Encourage people to wash their hands and obviously and hand sanitize, during the meeting and obviously when they're returning home after being together with you. You need to ask individuals to wear masks. It looks like that will be required. Once again, you may need to provide those, so you need to start searching for options or having groups make them. The emphasis is on still reserving surgical and N95 masks for healthcare facilities, especially our vulnerable nursing homes and healthcare workers. You need to start looking for, ways to collect those. There probably will be guidelines concerning the Lord's Supper and baptism. One possibility on baptism is if you baptize, whoever you baptize in that water, unless it's another family member who lives in the same household, you better drain that water, clean the pool, and fill it back up again. Lord's Supper, there are some options there, but still you need to be very aware that there may be guidelines given that will be restrictive to those activities for a season. Obviously, anybody who's been diagnosed and you see any of the symptoms that are listed there, I won't read those to you, but they need to be, told to stay at home is what it says. That's probably the language we might need to use very graciously. I would say, obviously, if people have somebody in the household with it, they need to self-quarantine for 14 days and not come to the services. I'm saying you may want to provide a station outside where people can have their temperature taken before they go in if they choose to. Some people don't have any idea if they're running a temperature, and to be honest with you, you offer that, it might give some comfort to your people. It's not a requirement as far as I know, but it might be a good thing to do, a little gravy on the taters to go that extra mile. Churches might be asked to have a plan in place to address when someone is sick at a service or meeting. Now, we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but you can't just gather and say, well, we don't know if anybody was. You probably need to have a plan in place as to what you're going to do. And we'll talk a little bit about that, one aspect of that in a few minutes. But you need to be thinking about that now, not after the barn doors open and the horse got out of the barn. Other suggestions, as soon as possible, form a reentry team or whatever you want to call it. That will help with planning and implementation of the church gatherings. They need to be in place, I think, to get ready for service one, but then they need to continue to operate because guidelines are going to begin to change and things are going to begin to open up and there might even be closing back or pulling back of some things, and that team needs to be in on the conversation early and remain engaged throughout this season, so that you have leaders that are identified and known by your church as people that are helping with this. You maybe have already named that team. I would suggest if you have that you make known to your church who you have, and I certainly would make sure that there's a good representation from those that have healthcare backgrounds as well as maybe other backgrounds that might give comfort and encouragement to your people that the right people are in place helping with this. You need to post helpful signs. There's a link there about places you can go. The signs need to be friendly. I know that you can have some that are written very matter-of-factly and aren't necessarily friendly, but you do want to make sure they're clear and that they're not misunderstood what they mean. So if you use a bunch of emojis and things like that, not everybody understands what an emoji means. So you may not want to use an emoji sign. You may want to have one with words on it, maybe with an emoji, because there is a generation of people that have no idea what the emojis mean, and I'm in that generation. So that's for my sake. Utilize greeters to point people to available masks and bulletins. This is a little funny because they're telling you not to have the bulletins, but then they have you having people dedicated to pointing to where they are. I think it might be easier not to have them or find some other way to do that. They're encouraging greeters to be masked and consider wearing gloves because they're sort of the first line of defense, first line of greeting people as they come into the building. Have markers and signage in the sanctuary meeting space to guide social and physical distancing. So some people, like if you go into a doctor's office right now, they got these taped lines that show what 6 foot looks like. They might even have some tape. You might even have some tape to show what 6 foot on your pews looks like. So that would help people in knowing that there was forethought given to it and it wasn't a guesstimate. It might help people be more comfortable and obviously help people who don't like to play by the rules, where you can help them be more subject to playing by the rules. Other things to consider, I've put out a little post about a practice prayer and preparation event on Wednesday, May 20th. That's on the CKMB Facebook page and everything else, so you can go and look at that. You may have another plan, and that's great, but I think you want to have some type of opportunity for your people to know the lay of the land before, at least your leaders and the ones helping you implement it, before the first Sunday you meet together. So I'd encourage you to do that, if not on that Wednesday, sometime. I would say continue offering online parking lot options as well as in-person services that will allow attenders to come back in ways in which they are comfortable while safely maximizing the number of people on the property Sunday, May 24th. So what I'm suggesting is that you don't do away with options because you can go in person. You actually continue with the options that you have had, and maybe even expanding some. Because you're going to have people, said in an article I wrote, that everybody may be on ready, set, go, but in their minds, the light in their head is yellow. they're still cautious. And so I'd encourage you to understand that there are people that are concerned and cautious, and you want to give them a way to be able to re-enter at their pace in a way that respects their circumstances and situations. So if you do a FM transmitter, I would still do that even while you're meeting indoors for those that may feel more comfortable staying in the parking lot. If you do that, then have some people in the parking lot that are helping to greet and make people feel welcomed as well. Obviously, the online, y'all know what that means. I would suggest you have leaders not be seated in the service until about 5 to 10 minutes after the service starts to accommodate guests. The problem you're going to have is once somebody sits in a spot, if they try to give that spot up, they need to sanitize the space. So the best thing to do is to have people who are prepared to forego a seat to accommodate as many people as possible. And as soon as the service starts, they may not want to run in because Baptists, number one, never show up on time. And then number two, guests may not know your building and they may be running late only because of the uncertainty of where to go. And you want to leave them a prepared space for them to be able to join you in the service. So I'd encourage you to think about that. I would consider using ushers like parking attendants. So in other words, instead of an usher walking somebody down, you have an usher who points someone down to an usher who's placed at a pew where you're sitting people currently. If you have problems with entry, if your main entrance is, you have one main entrance, and you may have to feel from the front to the back of your sanctuary, from the pulpit to the backside, because you're going to run into a problem with too many people being in the walkways and everything else. That means your Baptists who show up early to ensure they get a back seat will end up on the front row. Praise the Lord, hallelujah. That ought to be great to see them sleeping closer to you rather than further away from you. So that ought to be interesting. But that's something to think about. Also, this is related to having a plan in case somebody gets sick. You may want to consider recording attendance. In other words, finding a way to say who's there. Because let's say somebody gets sick during a service, they end up testing positive, and then they try to trace that so that they can contact everybody impacted. If you had a record, that would help with that situation. You have to do this carefully. One way of doing this is to say, guys, there are people that are wondering how you're doing, and we'd love to be able to say, hey, they were in the service this past Sunday. They look like they were doing great type thing. You could use it as use the pastoral approach to getting that information. Brother Mickey out of David's Fork sort of does that with their drive-in church right now. And they use it sort of as a way of him not getting 80,000 emails asking how somebody's doing. They name who is in the service and every dog in the service. Now, I want to say this very quickly. I've yet to hear of a cat coming to any of our services during this time. We've only had dogs. I think it's proof that cats are of the devil. I just want to say that to sort of close out. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys and go over. And so I want to sort of open it up to questions. And we'll not only send this recording out, but I'm going to go ahead and send this PowerPoint out. We'll send a PowerPoint out, but understand that when you use this PowerPoint an hour from now, it may be outdated because the governor may have said something. So please understand that if you use this, it's based on the information that we have right now, okay? So I'm gonna stop sharing so I can get back to seeing as many faces as possible here. And there we go. So I saw that somebody raised their hand, please. I saw David Barron did. I don't know who else did. So what can we answer? And can somebody monitor the chat room and help me know what questions we have? And Nick, please feel free to help me out with some of these questions or add anything. Andy, see you on there. You may have some information as well. We certainly want you to share, and there may be others. I apologize if I don't see you at this point. So David Barron. Oh, go ahead, Nick, please.
No, I was just going to say I think that's real accurate of what the team came up with and what we hope is going to be rolled out this afternoon or early next week. I think that's a good, accurate reflection.
Thank you, Nick. Any questions? I said, David Barron, you had one, so go ahead.
Yeah, just one of the questions about cleaning supplies, especially the hand sanitizer. Is anybody finding a place where that's in stock? We have some already, but I'm just wondering, does anybody have a lead on supplies other than the Wild Turkey Distillery, which only half of our congregation will use, and the other half will hide it behind their backs. So,
and the other half will drink it.
Okay. All right. Now that one's supposed to be said. All right. Any suggestions?
Right.
Hilliard, our cleaning supply company, I think has those type of supplies, most of them in stock. I think their hand sanitizer is about 10 to 14 days out when I talked to him the other day.
Okay. Thank you. That was Steve Bruce. Somebody else was saying something.
My wife was at Walmart, so they had in Lawrenceburg. I don't know if it's going to help anybody, but they did have hand sanitizers and the Lysol wipes. And I know our local Dollar General stores have been getting some in. It's been going out quickly, but they have been getting some in.
Okay.
David, I just talked to our facilities manager. If you're talking about like sanitizing stations for individuals, that's a little trickier to get. But if you're talking about cleaning supplies to like wipe down pews and stuff of that nature, we're not having any problems getting that from like our Hilliards or whatever company you use for your supply, stuff like that. He said like the stuff to wipe down pews, wipe down doors and surfaces, that's pretty easy. The hand sanitizing stuff.
All right.
Hey, David.
Let me reply to a few of the things on the chat just for clarification's sake, and then we'll get back if that's okay. Somebody asked about the 36 square foot per person. Right now, what we're hearing is just six foot space. They're not using the square footage type analogy, and they are using the idea of skipping a pew. So I think you need to be cautious and listen or be on the lookout to hear exactly how they word it, to understand, because it does 36 square feet. If you do it in a literal way, does become very complicated. But at this point, that's not the language that we're understanding they might use. And families can sit together, so I think we're okay there. Let's see here. People gave some suggestions on how they're marking things out, so you may want to look at that. Now, my understanding is they have to wear a mask. There's questions about the mask. My understanding right now, Nick, is that your understanding that they are required, if they're in the service, to wear a mask, except for like the speaker or the singer?
As far as we're going to police it a little different, David.
Okay.
What we're going to do is we're going to require our greeters. We're requiring our staff to wear them. We're going to provide them for people as they come in, but we are not going to turn people away who will not put them on.
Okay. And of course that's subject to us finding out exactly what the governor says. So thank you, Nick, I see.
Didn't the governor say that it's the responsibility of each business? His recommendation is that people in public wear masks, but each business can permit you to come in or turn you away because you're not wearing a mask.
That's the understanding of businesses at this point. Yeah.
Wasn't that what they had the option to do that, but it was not mandated.
Right.
Correct.
It's not mandated. And we're assuming we'll get that same leadway there, but they are strongly encouraging people to wear them. So, all right, I'll make sure. Somebody asked about a cat had a dog personality. That's just a weird question. Okay. So somebody asked if we're in danger of having the government, governing, or people like police visiting us when we're open. I don't know about the danger, but I mean, it could happen. Let me say that people ask about the 40% example I used. That is what we're hoping for, but I think in some field testing that's been going on, more than likely, if you use social distancing, you're probably going to be closer to the 30 to 35%, depending on the size of your building and the layout of your building. But we're asking them to make it up to 40%. So it's an up to with social distancing, social physical distancing being required. I'm not saying you'll be able to get 40%. And the reason you may say, well, why did you only ask for 40? Well, we started with what they offered and tried to go up from there. We didn't get to set the first set of ideas. We got to respond to them. Is that right, Nick?
Yeah, they started with 50 people.
Yes.
And so we asked them to do a percentage based on our sanctuary. So we were not, we felt very grateful for 40%.
If they do it.
Yes, if they do it. I think 35 will be a minimum that we go to. I could be wrong, David, but I thought I saw something. One of her responses was 35%, meeting in the middle, and we asked for a 40% just to give us a little more room.
Yes, we did. That's to accommodate, churches of varying sizes. That allows more churches to meet in a reasonable way. But please understand, when we're saying what we asked for, you have to understand where they started. They started making it impossible for any church that runs any over 120, 150 people to have a reasonable way to meet without having so many services. The preachers wore out and your volunteers. So, all right, so let me go back to the question, and I don't remember. I'm sorry. I apologize. I cut somebody off there. Please accept my apology. Any other questions that come? I think we got the chat part done there.
How about disinfecting cloth chairs? It's going to be easier to do wood or plastic, but how do you do cloth?
Would that be spraying with a Lysol type thing, guys? What?
Yeah, you can spray that with a Lysol spray. It works really good on fabric.
Okay. You may want to test it before you spray it to make sure it doesn't, whatever you're using doesn't discolor your chairs.
Oh, and it's going to make them nice and wet too.
Yeah. So you got to do it with enough time for them to dry a little bit.
David, also on the chairs too, some have suggested that if you have a clothing steamer, that is also a good thing to use going behind the Lysol to sanitize as well. So
now, please understand that if you're using something like what Derek just mentioned, between services is going to take a long time.
Yeah.
If you use something, so you need to either have multiple ones available, or if you're only planning on having one, obviously you've got a week or several days to prepare for that. So,
Hey, David.
Yes.
Air cleaning people have also recommended if you do the sprays, try to find them that are non-scented, because we got some of our people, when we first did this, we had some had to leave because, they sprayed and coughing and sneezing, and, stuff. And so we're trying to meet every need. And it's
Good word. Good word, Jonathan. Yeah.
The other option is if you're going to have to have two services and you got to skip every other row in your second service, you'd use the row that didn't get used in the first service. You're still sanitizing the row that was used in the earlier service, but then you don't have to worry about it being wet, and gives you a little quicker turnover if you needed to do that.
That's a good idea, Steve. You still have to wipe the back though as people are touching, but what you're saying is basically if you're going to alternate, just have the second service and the second, even though you go back and clean the one between services. That's a good idea.
I'd just like Derek to highlight that when you said that was a good idea. If we could somehow bold that for me, that would really be helpful.
Yeah, we're going to make a poster out of that, Steve. We are. Yeah. All right. Any other questions or thoughts? I'm trying to.
David, we had a good question there in the chat from Keith about submitting a reopening plan to the governor. Are churches in that same boat as businesses are?
We're not hearing that, are we, Nick?
No, my understanding is they're going to treat Kentucky Baptist kind of as an umbrella organization. And so what the guidelines that we're working on, Todd will send out kind of these statewide, and that is our kind of business plan. Now, we don't have the authority to enforce it, but they're going to allow us to work under that umbrella. Here's the guidelines. This is what it's going to look like. And they're going to kind of treat that as, here's what we're doing. And so that plan would be enforced by each local congregation, but I don't think it's going to have to be submitted to the state.
Thank you, Nick. Does that answer the question?
But we still need to have the stuff in place before we open, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Each church, yes.
Yeah. And you still need to be thinking about what you're going to do if someone amongst you gets sick or you find out they become sick. You need to have some group that is thought through how you're going to contact people, how you're going to report it, whatever it takes to stay in the good graces of those who are, working with us in this regard. I don't know how elaborate that plan is. That is one thing that Nick, you help me if you know something I don't know, or maybe Andy, you may know something Nick and I don't know, but the bottom line is that has not been fleshed out a whole lot, but it's there hanging as something we need to know about and have given some thought to.
Yeah, I don't know any more about that part of it.
I don't either, David.
Okay. Thank you. I just
I
wanted to
say
make sure.
when you
Go
talk
ahead.
about every other pew, it's going to be tough to put people any other place but on the ends of those pews, right? Because you put people in the middle of a pew and it's a child has to get up and use the bathroom.
Yeah. Andy, as long as they're only using the middle of the pew, you either use the middle or you use the ends, but you can't use both.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can get two families if you use the ends, but just and then also thinking about people on stage with masks. I know it's tough. It'd be tough to preach or sing with a mask on, but I think they should at least maybe have it kind of around their neck, or so that there's that example that there's when they're not preaching or singing that they're putting their mask on.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we're planning on is, on stage, no mask, come off stage, you put the mask on. So, and again, we're cutting down on all of our greeting of our people that come in the doors and stuff, basically stay towards the front, up on the stage, and then, greet them that way, even though we want to go shake their hands and hug their necks.
All right. Any other questions or thoughts? And please let me make sure everybody's clear on this, that we do not have a definitive word from the state officials yet, or the government. We're hoping that we will. I'm anticipating that there will be an article from Kentucky Today that if we don't hear from the governor, that there'll be an article in a Kentucky Today that will speak about some of these same things we've spoken about, so that for some of your folks that may say, well, all right, they gave that presentation, how do they know this? Well, the Kentucky Today would be part 2 of the verification. You want to be careful, just take somebody's word, including ours, for any of this, because we don't know everything, but we certainly, we do have some insights, but they're subject to what the governor says or the state officials say. And I've even noticed some local officials are chiming in on some things too, so you need to pay attention to them as well.
Hey, David, two things quickly. One is, in most churches are going to have to do multiple worships. So we basically took our life groups, our Sunday school, and we are suggesting those classes and their children go to one or the other services. We've divided it up so we can get what we think is a 40% attendance in the building. So guys need to think about that. But I have a question.
Well, let me add real quick. Mike works with Porter Memorial, so you know the context of which church he's speaking about, for those that may not know that. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, thanks. The other thing, just a question. We're removing guest cards, hymnals, everything from the pew rack, so they're not touched. How do you guys, this is a question we talked about in our staff meeting yesterday, getting information from a first-time guest. I know some of you do that. You can go to your website and do it on your phone, but love to hear some ideas on how you're going to get that information, since we're not going to get them to physically fill out a card.
Let me say, Mike, obviously, if you decide that you're going to use a bulletin, you could have an insert. Even if they're picking it up on their own, then they could drop it off. If you had a stationary offering box, you could also have a stationary card box where people would drop off cards. So if you're going to use a bulletin anyway, you can insert a card. That could be a prayer, a request card. It could be any number of things. I'm not saying you do that, but if you're already going to use a bulletin, you could potentially do that. Let me also say something real quick, that if you're able to use different parts of your building simultaneously and using closed circuit or whatever, you might be able to accommodate a lot more people that way, and therefore you might be able to minimize the number of multiple times you're in the building and sanitizing. So
David, that's how we're going to do overflow services. We're going to have our gym set up for some overflow in case our numbers get out of hand. I'll be perfectly honest with you. At first, I thought we were going to come back with massive crowds. I think we're probably going to come back with much smaller crowds than we anticipated. But that'll make it easier on the social distancing. I was watching a couple of pastors yesterday respond on Facebook and with their congregations from around the state, and a lot of negative feedback, like, hey, can't we just keep doing it the way it's going? It's working right now. So I think we've got a mixed bag in our church. Some are really excited. Some are really leery. So I don't think, I personally don't believe that we're going to be as full as we were beforehand, even though there's no soccer tournaments and no trips to the lake or whatever that's going to take place. So that's my belief.
Hey, David, I have a thought. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mickey. Yes, we can.
One of the things that we've been doing is we take, with the outside service, we take the offering and ask for any information that they want to pass on to me. But those go in buckets, but we do not look at those for about 4 to 5 days. We don't touch our offering. We don't touch anything for 4 or 5 days. And then they come in with the mask and gloves on and take a look at everything. So, we're hearing that hopefully the virus is dead by then if it's on something.
Yeah. Thank you, Mickey. That's a good word as well.
Hey, David,
you want to protect us doing it. Jonathan?
What we're doing we've gotten rid of the paper, and we're going to be asking, put a text number up on our screen and say, hey, if you're a visitor, would you just text your name and phone number to one of our staff? Here's a phone number, here's a text number. Just text, my wife, we're Jonathan and Connie Jones visiting. Here's a phone number, or, and just text that to us, and, let them know that we're not going to sell it, not going to do anything with it, but as far as get it out, but, to be able to pray for them and to thank them for being there, just text us your information.
All right.
Just to think about, Steve Bruce had 2 really good ideas, just blows me away. It just, I'm just amazed, Steve. The other thing, Nick does a really,
next time I see you.
I know. Nick does a really good listening guide. And one thing we've thought of as we've been sending that out, we're going to ask people just to download the listening guide for the sermon before they come to worship. That's that's one piece less we have to give out or touch. Just an idea.
Okay. Chris Jones, did I see you have a question earlier?
Well, I was not a question so much as I know a lot of folks are not crazy about using the sanitizer from distilleries, but our local guy here has got thousands of gallons available. I know people are still having a hard time getting it, so I just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, if somebody needs it, they can contact us at Central, and I can get it to anybody.
Yeah. Chris is related to Central Baptist in Paris, and obviously they don't use that stuff for the Lord's Supper, for communion, so they have it left over to help clean with. So that's good news.
Do they make Baptist packaging for that, Chris?
Well,
Baptist
I could
labels?
probably talk him into that.
I think he could probably up his sales right now if he would.
Yeah. Yes, Bill.
David, what we're doing, we've our smaller church, we're about 140, 150. But what we've done, we've taken, we got 12 deacons, and each one of those deacons has 8 to 10 families. And we're taking those deacons and we're figuring out how many people's in those families. And that's how we're gonna control our crowd. 6 deacons' families will come to one service, and then 6 deacons' families will come to the second service. And then in between, we'll sanitize in between, and then we're gonna leave a little bit of room for visitors in there. So that's how we're gonna kind of control how we can, the numbers that come in, try to keep them reasonable numbers. So we're just using a deacon family ministry plan to do that. And all the deacons responsible to get their families contacted and to get them there for whichever service. And then each week we're going to mix up the different deacons so folks can see each other from different times. Each week they'll see somebody different that's in the church. So hopefully we won't have to do that too long, but that's what our plan is right now.
Thank you, Bill. I noticed in the chat room something we need to be very sensitive to when we're doing this is the idea of making sure that we're gracious in these guidelines, that we communicate that. Tim had brought up the possibility of if we do this, I'm not sure he said this, but if we did this rigidly or we did this in a way that wasn't gracious, that's one of the reasons I'm using the word physical distancing more than social distancing, especially with churches. Because if you look in your mirror and you smile, your eyes tell people you're smiling, even if the mask is covering your face. If you look like a grump under your mask, you're going to look like a grump with your eyes. And in body language and the way that we approach these things is going to be very important. That we communicate this as gracious as we can. And so, Tim, anything you want to say about that, I would welcome it. So,
I guess my fear is just, churches aren't known necessarily for being everyone always getting along all the time. It's going to be a sensitivity thing, in my opinion. And some people, especially with half of our face covered, there's going to be some people who won't understand. A lot of our nonverbal communication is, the expression on our face is with hugs. It's and so someone, I know I'll have a little old lady who will want a hug from me, and she'll be offended because I won't give her a hug, and she won't maybe understand what the big deal is, and I don't know how I can communicate that in a way that says, I know you're probably fine, I'm probably fine, it's probably fine, but I just can't, for the sake of what we're trying to do. If we want to be able to come back to church, the way we come back to church is by keeping distance. But I don't know how to say that to some people. If that makes sense.
David?
Yes, Nick.
I just sent you an article that a friend of mine sent to me that's entitled Navigating Different COVID-19 Recovery Convictions. And I thought it was a really good article read for pastors as we think about reentering. I mean, we're all in the same boat. We have people who are scared to get out of their house and people who believe this is a hoax. And we're all in the same boat with that. I mean, I would say every one of our churches has both of those extremes, and a lot of people stuck in the middle of that. And so I think this is a valid concern that a lot of people are having navigating that. And so I sent that to you and to the office, so if you wanted to send it out.
Yeah, Chris Mofield, please go ahead and send that out now. So this article might help address that, Tim. But I think, Tim, by nature, we as ministers, even if some are more extrovert and some are more introvert, but we're very, very much people who want to be able to accommodate people in ways that would to affirm them and help them and encourage them in positive things like you're speaking of. So I don't know, in some ways, I think that even having a little bit of humor, maybe in having some type of thing on your screen, a virtual hug or something, I don't know, create something that lightens the mood rather than always making the mood completely just serious. Now, I know that I may get in trouble. Some folks that think once things start, you can't laugh too much. Well, all right, do this 30 seconds before the service starts, whatever you need to do, but find a way to break the tension by using some things that might be a little more lighthearted but serious, if that makes sense.
I think the word I've been using, trying to get my deacons and some of our leadership to understand, is the word respect. We're going to have to respect people from where they're coming in. And I don't need to, especially early on, I don't need to give my theories on, even when we went back to having Sunday school small groups. I told our teachers, I'm not interested in you giving your theories about COVID-19, your political views. I know that's all legal and you have a free right to do that. But right now we need to be trying to meet people's needs. And that's more important than standing up and making sure our convictions are known and stated. That's fine to have them, but we need to have respect for people and not make them feel bad for not coming because they're nervous, scared, whatever.
That's good.
We still deal with people even before all this that had faith issues. They just didn't always make them public. Now, some of that's going to get a little public because they may say, well, I'm scared to death I could die, or I'm not sure. I question God sometimes, and we need to be able to minister to those people. And me voicing my opinion that I think something's dumb or crazy, or that's just a stupid, or you lack faith, doesn't help us to minister. And we've all been in that position. So I've been stressing respect. We've already been talking about that among our leadership, respect. And it starts with us, even with your phone conversations, having respect, still talking people through, but have respect for where they're at.
Yeah. I think this is a great time to utilize the meat sacrifice to idols argument and looking out for the weaker brother. And I don't think you define who that weaker brother is, but I think if we all show some graciousness and try to meet other people where they are in this, I think we can lead this well as pastors and get through it, but we have to get in front of it and not respond to it.
Yeah.
David, we met with our staff here last week, and then I got deacon meeting on Saturday at 5, but even amongst our staff, what little bit we got, they're expecting to come back and seeing something of a normal setting as what we had prior to where we were before. And I keep emphasizing with them that we're not going to come back to that normal again for a long time, if ever. And one of the things that we're doing in the month of May, we're going to plan on opening probably the first Sunday in June, but we're going to spend the month of May communicating to our people when they come back what they will see, what it will be like, and try to paint a picture of that for them before they return, so they don't come in with a big shock on their face, with signs and people's masks and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's important we communicate with our folks and spend several weeks doing that. This is what it's going to be like. This is what we have to do, and be gracious and loving with that. But we will not return to the norm that we had. And as much as I fight that kicking and screaming, I want to be back to that normal, but it's not going to be that way. And so we have to find that new norm, and it's going to take some practice, some experiences, and a few times before we find what that new norm is. But communicating that to our people prior to them coming back to me I think is an important thing, so they don't come back with a big shock on their face. Because older people in the church, they want things to be like the way they were. You've heard that story. Don't change anything, but that's impossible. So that's what we're going to try to do.
Good word, Bill. Let me say first of all that most of us as ministers have never been normal, so that so we've already got a head start on adjusting to what's normal or not normal.
Especially Steve Bruce.
I am. I'm
Yeah.
normal.
Thank you. Mike, I believe Mike put something in the chat room about maybe videotaping or putting a video together of what it might look like to flow through, sharing that with your people. Is that you, Mike, that shared that idea?
Yeah, we talked about this in our staff yesterday. I had an idea, maybe, as a pastor, someone could video you pulling up in the parking lot in your car, getting out, walking to the front doors, and your greeters, if you're going to have them hold them open or if they're propped open, showing the different stations that you might have for sanitation, stuff like that, showing the pews, if you've marked any of them off, how they're going to look. I don't know. If people could see on video before they walk in the building, it might alleviate some of their fears.
Well, I think that we need our churches to do movies. We need to compete with Sherwood Baptist and Albany, Georgia anyway, that does the movies all the time. So you guys produce a movie, put it out. I think that's a good idea, because telling people and then allowing them to maybe see it is probably beneficial. So I think that's a good idea to build on what Bill talked about. So,
David.
Dan, let me take 1 second here. Dan, there you are. Dan, I'm going to make you the moderator of the meeting, because I've got to go to physical therapy. Let me tell you something, guys. Don't fall down your steps and break your leg in 3 places, because 6 months later, you're still trying to figure out how to walk in a normal way. So I've got to head to therapy. I'm going to sort of get off here. And Dan, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you, and you conclude it as you see fit. Was that you, Nick, that was going to say something?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say one of the things that we're going to do, I see people talking about rolling things out slow, and I think that's a great idea. We didn't understand, even, I was in on some of the prep work of this. We didn't understand, what do you do in midweek stuff? Can you have more than just your Sunday morning worship? Can you have a Wednesday night worship still? We're going to wait 2 or 3 weeks, but we're hoping to be able to roll out some type of youth worship, college worship, and on off nights and off times, just for those who seem to be the most impacted by this, losing their graduations, losing their, type stuff, giving them some opportunities. We don't see much option for children in preschool. We think they're just going to have to be in with their families until restrictions are loosened. It was our suggestion that they tied daycare opening to allowing us to use preschool in our churches. We feel like that gives the churches a little bit of cover, because there will be some people who are frustrated that they don't have anything for their kids, or they don't have anything for their preschoolers. But that way, when the preschool opens, we can go ahead and say, well, if they're going to open up for-profit preschools and have that type of social contact with children, then we can do that as churches as well.
Hey, Dan, I got a question real quick. Just input, something concern I have with this as well is, all of us as churches, we have that group, that's very loyal to the church. It's there whenever the door is open, doesn't matter the age. And for our church, we have a group that, they're seniors, but they want to be there. They enjoy the camaraderie. They enjoy seeing people. They enjoy being at the church. But how do we communicate to, I guess, the population that's in our church that might be at risk more than others? How do we communicate to them that to be how are you all doing it to communicate to them just to be very careful, even as we're coming back together, if you are at risk? That
I'm giving them permission. I'm giving them permission not to come. The ones I'm talking to, I talk to seniors, and I'm giving them permission not to come and encourage them not to come for at least a few weeks to see how things are going. So I'm just encouraging them one-on-one, just not to come. And what I'm finding from seniors, many of them are already thinking that anyway, and they just need permission to go ahead and do that. So
Okay.
I'm just giving them permission not to come to church.
And what we're doing is we're also doing the radio broadcast on the FM station, and we're encouraging our seniors, if they want to, just to stay in their cars, come and sit in the parking lot and pick up the station, and they can have that option as well, and giving them permission to do that, and that's okay, and nobody will bother them. So different things, something like that, we're trying to meet their needs as well.
Anybody else with that? One of the things, I don't know if Jeremy's still on here and not over at Pinker, and I know he's got 24 days of prayer. He started a prayer towards the first service on the 24th. That might be something to get some thought to. I had a phone call, so I missed some things. That if you have a prayer emphasis leading up to this, and maybe on that 20th, Nick, I don't know if you all talked about that or not, but 20th might be an opportunity for a few to come in the building and have a prayer meeting.
Yeah, we're going to do our greeting team, and we're going to bring all of our greeting team in on the 20th, which is like 100, 120 folks, because we rotate them weekly. And we're going to have a prayer time, and then a walkthrough that night for how to do it. Yeah. So, but we're not going to open that up beyond the greeting team and that, because I'm afraid we might have trouble with social distancing. If I say, hey, come on back tonight for a prayer time. Dan, there was a question on the chat that I thought was one that we ought to look at, and that was on busing children. I'm confident that the spirit of what was created with the team that we would not do anything that would compromise social distancing. That was the spirit of them giving us more flexibility and more room. I think that would be discouraged right now with children and youth, and even with senior adults on busing. But that is not in the guidelines. But the spirit of what they were talking about and the communications we had, I feel like that would need to be delayed a little bit.
I agree. And I love the idea of using the 20th as a sort of a time to get your team together to prepare for the 24th. I think that's an excellent thought.
And I was on a call the other day, and there was a senior adult that was part of the Zoom call, and she was sort of half jokingly said, "I'm a little bit hurt by the way we're talking about senior adults," and she said she's heard folks talk about we're going to put them in a corner, and I know that's nobody's intent, but I just think when we talk about older population, that maybe if we use phrases like vulnerable populations or at-risk populations, rather than designating an age group, we might be better off.
I agree, and again, I think the word I use, I just give them permission. I don't tell them they can't come, but I give them permission not to come.
Yeah, and that's a good word.
One of the things you'll have to think through, guys, is you're going to have people start to recognize pretty on there's going to be an inequity of response. Church tries to be very fair, and we want to have stuff for our seniors and our preschool and our children and our young families and our empty nesters. We're not going to be able to bring back anything if we have to bring back everything. So there's going to be some things that are able to come back almost, pretty quickly. And there's going to be other things that are going to be maybe even post-vaccine before they come back. And you're going to have to learn how to communicate that with your congregation, that we're going to do for one what we wish we could do for all. And because like the youth group's going to get to come back a lot quicker than our preschool, because youth know how to social distance, and you'll have to communicate that, or at least all except for youth couples know how to social distance.
Yeah, and guys, this is, and you know, we're all treading on ground that we've never treaded on before, and we really don't know where this is going to lead. There's always a chance of a spike, and that can change things again. So, you know, the very first pillar of this is be flexible. The second one is be safe. We need to make sure we keep our people safe. I think we have that responsibility. I don't think any of us want to hear the word that our church was one place where no spike came from. So I think we need to be very, very sensitive to that.
Yeah, and I have a ninth beatitude that I use. Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape.
That's good. Anything else, guys? I don't want to keep you. I know you guys are busy, especially, but keep your eyes open. Listen to the governor. Listen to what comes out through our KBC. All the other publications coming about. Keep your eyes open to what the mayor says in your particular cities. All those are going to affect what you do. We got a plan, and we hope that Nick, I hope they accept it and that gets rolled out. But we're still subject to whatever they decided to do, and what may change in the environment as well. If no other questions, answers, or comments, have a good day, guys. Be safe and wash your hands.
Thank you.